Hello, this is Russell Dobular sitting in for Jimmy Dore, who is performing in El Paso, Texas on Friday. Come for the comedy, stay for the bean dip. So, our next story, we have a couple of stories here dealing with the transgender issue or gender ideology. And first, you can't understand the present without understanding the past. So somebody died, and Satan's crafty minions had been waiting for this person to get down there among them so that they can begin their flaying and burning as quickly as possible, at least if there's any justice in the universe. Bennett Braun, the psychiatrist who fueled the satanic panic, just died at 83. What does that have to do with what's going on around the push to spread transgender medicine and gender ideology everywhere? It very closely resembles what went on during the Satanic Panic. And I think a lot of people who maybe are too young to remember the Satanic Panic, sometimes it's hard for them to imagine that the entire medical industry, that the entire media can in lockstep push a theory that not only is unproven, but that the evidence strongly suggests is wrong as truth, and actually perform acts of medicine on actual patients based on a completely false premise. It's hard for them to imagine that. So they'll say, oh, but all of these organizations are for it. All these organizations back the Satanic Panic too. And you know how it ended? Lawsuits. It ended in lawsuits, just like gender ideology is ending now. There are more lawsuits announced all the time, and you ain't seen nothing yet, in my opinion. So Bennett Braun, a Chicago psychiatrist whose diagnosis of repressed memories involving horrific abuse by devil worshippers helped to fuel what became known as the Satanic Panic of the 1980s and 90s, died on March 20th in Lauderhill, Florida, north of Miami. He was 83. Jane Braun, one of his former wives, said he died in a hospital from complications of a fall. Dr. Braun gained renown in the early 1980s as an expert in two of the most popular and controversial areas of psychiatric treatment: repressed memories and multiple personality disorder, now known as dissociative identity disorder. He claimed that he could help patients uncover memories of childhood trauma, the existence of which he and others said was responsible for the splintering of a person's self into many distinct personalities. He created a unit dedicated to dissociative disorders at Rush Presbyterian St. Luke's Medical Center in Chicago, now Rush University Medical Center, was frequently quoted in the news media, and helped to found what is now the International Society for the Study of Trauma and Dissociation, a professional organization that today has more than 2,000 members. It was from that sizable platform that Dr. Braun publicized his most explosive findings: that in dozens of cases, his patients discovered memories of being tortured by satanic cults, and in some cases of having participated in the torture themselves. He was not the only psychiatrist to make such a claim, and his supposed revelations keyed into a growing national panic. The psychiatric profession bore some responsibility for the growing panic. Oh, you think? The American Psychiatric Association was actually one of the organizations that got sued and lost millions of dollars. So yeah, they were more than tangentially involved, with respected researchers like Dr. Braun giving it a gloss of authority. He and others ran seminars and distributed research papers. They even gave the phenomena a quasi-medical abbreviation, SRA, for satanic ritual abuse. Dr. Braun's inpatient unit at Rush became a magnet for referrals and a warehouse for patients, some of whom he kept medicated and under supervision for years. Wow, but they're doctors. They're doctors. They know what they're doing, right? The Satanic Panic began to wane in the early 1990s. A 1992 FBI investigation found no evidence of coordinated cult activity in the United States, and a 1994 report by the National Center on Child Abuse and Neglect surveyed over 12,000 accusations of satanic ritual abuse and found that not a single one held up under scrutiny. So for anyone who says, well, if it's not true, how could you have all these people claiming to be trans? That 12,000 people falsely believed, under the direction, under the guidance of people they trusted in the medical industry, under the influence of a media mass hysteria, that they had forgotten that they were high priests in satanic cults, that they had been ritually abused by Satanists. 12,000 fucking accusations. So when you say, well, how could it be so many people? I mean, this is a lot crazier, isn't it? And people were convinced of this. And this is in a world where we didn't have social media. You didn't even have nearly such a pervasive influence of screens in people's lives. Let me finish.
Yeah.
Many people distanced themselves from their earlier enthusiasms. In 1995, Geraldo Rivera apologized for an episode of his show that covered the falsehood. However, even in 1998, the NBC series Dateline ran an episode claiming to show widespread satanic activity in Mississippi. Now, this is exactly what we're starting to see with this, as we'll cover in the next segment, where they're lying about what's in the Cass report, which was just released in the UK, debunking most of the theories around youth gender medicine. They're lying in order to discredit it, but other groups are starting to distance themselves from it and say, no, that's not what we ever said. All right, so this is Mia Hughes. She was the author working with Schellenberger of the recently released WPATH files. WPATH is the premier organization encouraging transgender medicine in youth. And within their own internal documents, she revealed in her files that they don't even believe this. Among themselves, they talk about how they don't really have any strong evidence for this treatment, how dangerous it is, how they're causing medical complications. They won't tell you that publicly, but she revealed in these files amongst themselves, they are talking about this. So she directly makes this comparison to the Satanic Panic. In the 1970s, the field of psychiatry went mad, latching onto a completely pseudoscientific theory about repressed memories. The recovered memory movement spawned two monsters, the multiple personality disorder epidemic and the Satanic Panic. These epidemics ruined lives and tore families apart. They were both based entirely upon lies, triggered by best-selling fictional books masquerading as nonfiction, fueled by a media frenzy, given legitimacy by the medical world, and bolstered by political lobbying. The madness only ended when the claims being made became so ludicrous that the whole thing collapsed under the weight of its own absurdity and ended in an avalanche of lawsuits. Sound familiar? Bennett Braun was the leading psychiatrist who fueled the lunacy. His most egregious crime was his treatment of Patricia Burgess. Burgess was suffering from severe postpartum depression, but had the misfortune of seeking help from Braun, who diagnosed her with MPD and under hypnosis convinced her she had over 300 personalities and was a high priestess of an international satanic cult, and that she had tortured, murdered, and cannibalized thousands of children. This is not mentioned here, but by the way, before this guy was done, he had her children in treatment too. Yet, even after she sued him and won over $10 million in damages, he still refused to accept responsibility, instead insisting that she created all the memories herself. They say history doesn't repeat, but it does rhyme. And today we find ourselves in the midst of an eerily similar madness. We're witnessing another psychiatric epidemic that is ruining lives and tearing families apart. Again, it is built upon a lie, but this time a lie by a so-called civil rights movement. Like its predecessor, it is fueled by media frenzy, given legitimacy by the medical world, and bolstered by an intense campaign of political lobbying, the likes of which has never been seen before. It's in its death throes now. The lawsuits have already started, and hopefully soon it will be condemned to the dustbin of history alongside MPD and lobotomies.
What's MPD?
A multiple personality disorder. But like Walter Freeman before him, Braun never faced up to his crime. Walter Freeman is the guy who took lobotomy from being a skilled surgical procedure to being something that a schmuck with an ice pick could do. And as a result, what's that?
It was at one point a skilled procedure?
It was. It was considered like an intense medical procedure, and he turned it into something where like you could train a nurse to just hit the thing, and that's why so many people got lobotomized. He made it this really, he's the one, he invented the transorbital lobotomy. Before that, they would have taken off the skull cap.
I thought that was the first kind of lobotomy they did, was that?
No, they would take the whole skull cap off. He invented the transorbital lobotomy, so you go in through the eye. So theoretically, you know, a person with no surgical skill, which he had no surgical training himself, could do it. He performed over 4,000 lobotomies. He actually killed somebody once posing for a picture in the middle of a lobotomy. He was an absolute fucking monster.
It's so easy, even Jeffrey Dahmer could do it.
Yes, exactly. Braun never faced up to his crime, and we all know this same depressingly predictable pattern is going to play out once again in the coming decades, with many of those responsible for today's atrocity occurring in gender clinics, never admitting their wrongdoings, remaining oblivious to the devastation they've wrought. And I'm sure that is sadly true, but I hope a lot of these people do face at least civil lawsuit forms of justice. Now, anyone who's interested in this book came out pretty much at the time that this was dying down, but it's still the best book that I've ever seen on this subject. Making Monsters, False Memories, Psychotherapy, and Sexual Hysteria by Richard Offshay and Ethan Waters. If you're interested in looking at the history of the Satanic Panic, which does have a lot of parallels to what's happening now, I would really recommend that.
This is also, well, there's a new one every week. So, you know, Me Too is CAA, the agency, covering its ass for the real pimping of actresses to Harvey Weinstein, which Rose McGowan said, oh, she's crazy. It sounds like she's telling the truth to me. And CAA represents Joe Biden. That's why it stopped with him, the Me Too stop. That was another satanic panic. Then they would go, what are you, a QAnon? You think there's kids? Only women are being sexually assaulted. Kids, though, it never happens. Right. What are you, a QAnon? This guy, this is a thing to me that was put out. It's to muddy the waters of the real thing, because if you can insert fake memories of Satan rituals into people that they believe happened, that means the system works. That means the mind control system works. You think they're not really doing that? That's to muddy the waters. That Geraldo episode, I remember it. I just watched it recently with Michael Aquino from the Temple of Set, Colonel Aquino in the military, who wrote the great Mind War document with a Fox News general back in like 2004. It got declassified. The Presidio Satanic Panic thing, I think that was all to cover that, because I bet you 100% that guy from the Temple of Set was doing those kind of experiments. He was the PSYOP inventor.
All of the evidence that, and this is what I mean, it's very much like now, all of the evidence we have, this is why every time they do a meta-analysis on all of the available data, it shows that the basic theories of trans kids is very weak to actually runs against it. It was very much like that. Every study that had ever been done on hypnosis showed that it makes you highly open to suggestion. So you have these therapists claiming they're uncovering memories when they're implanting memories. Clearly, they're hypnotizing people and saying, is there a man in a robe there? And of course, they're hypnotized. They're going to say, yes, I see a man in a robe.
Right. I'm saying there's a lot of government actors that do that to cover for the real thing. NLP, you know NLP?
Okay. But what was happening at this time was a medical industry, very much like now, of psychiatrists, medical professionals, who in a country where you have a for-profit healthcare system,
in the military,
they are highly motivated
right,
to pursue these false diagnoses and create new areas of profit.
Hey, come see us do a live show in El Paso, Texas, San Antonio, Denver, Colorado, Los Angeles, California, May 19th at the Zephyr Theater. That's a panel show with video. Ashland, Virginia, Athens, Georgia, Rutherford, New Jersey, Minneapolis, Ontario, California, Irvine, California. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets.